All right, so
Take 3.
Yeah, take 3. Yeah, we're just going to be doing an Agile talk. Are there any questions? No. Okay. All right. Brilliant. I'm going to stop 10 minutes in to make sure it's still recording. Okay. Okay. You should be good. Agile software development. Okay. Before we begin that, does anybody have any initial questions that they have about what Agile is, or has anybody heard of Agile before? Might be, you've heard of Agile before, Ken? Yeah, what have you heard about Agile?
It's a process of how to write software.
Okay, yeah, seems like good. Peter, have you got, what do you think Agile is?
It's probably more relaxed
Okay.
than other ways.
Dean? What is Agile to you?
I remember it as an acronym, but I forgot what it means.
What's it about? What's it in relation to?
I don't remember.
It's okay, it's okay. Don't worry, it's not something that we've been over too hard yet, so we'll take and learn about Agile and what Agile is. I can tell you that Agile is very popular. It's used a lot in the industry. The companies that I've worked at have used Agile. A lot of companies in Cornwall use Agile, and we most commonly see it in software development. So, covering overall Agile methods, plan-driven and Agile development, okay? Something called extreme programming. Raise your hands if you've heard of extreme programming. Dean, you heard of extreme programming before?
I have a what programming?
Extreme programming, have you heard of it before?
No.
Okay, just wondering.
Why would extreme... How does that work?
You'll find out what it means.
Guy hanging off a cliff.
It's not dangerous programming. Okay, Agile project management, and then scaling Agile methods, which is just a fancy way of saying applying Agile to a different size project. Okay, so rapid software development. Who's heard of rapid software development? Maybe a few of you, okay. So rapid software development is essentially where we put the product at the focus of our requirement in a development project, okay? So essentially what you see in software development is rapid prototyping, okay? We scale down the planning and design, and we just jump straight into building the thing, right? We quickly get together the specifications, whip up a design and start building, right? And we do this for lots of different reasons. One of the main reasons I think that rapid software development is used is because sometimes, depending on the client that we're dealing with or the project that we're doing, it's much more tangible and realistic to have something that exists in front of us, right? It's like I've said previously, if we're in an industry environment, say we're all front-end engineers, right, and we're building a website for somebody, and we've spent 3 months doing the planning and design, but we haven't built anything. And the client walks in through our front door and says, what have you built for me? I want a progress update. And we go, oh, here are the designs. But the client goes, I wanted a working prototype done in 3 months. So this way, we jump straight to the prototyping stage. Obviously, there are drawbacks. Can anybody think of a drawback that might incur if we just jump straight to development?
Confusion in design.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
probably even lead to errors.
Mm. Oversight. So yeah, things that probably could have been avoided with better planning. Again, I'm under the philosophy that good planning is good practice, not just for software development, for anything you do really. So Agile methods. So dissatisfaction with the overheads involved in software design methods of the 1980s and 1990s led to the creation of Agile methods of project development, okay? So we focus on the code rather than the design. I think that's quite a valid principle. Why do we think that might be a good principle to sort of live by in software development? To focus on the literal rather than the concepts involved. I mean, if you think about it, when we're building an app, yes, okay, we can design the user interface, but if the code doesn't run, the code doesn't work, ultimately our development stage is going to take far longer, okay? So when we shift our focus from design to code, we're focusing more on what's actually there instead of what we're trying to build. It's based on an iterative approach to software development. And what does iterative mean, guys? What's an iteration? Okay, right. Cars drive fast, iteration 1. Cars drive fast, iteration 2. Cars drive fast, iteration 3. Yeah, it's a counter, right? So you can think of iterative approach as just a repetitive process, okay? An iteration is one cycle of something, okay? So in programming, one of the principles that we use is iteration for loops, you know? You ever heard of a loop in programming, like an if statement, you know, if condition A is true, begin a counter or a loop. That's where iterative comes from. It just means to complete a cycle once, right? They're intended to deliver working software quickly and evolve to meeting changing requirements, okay? So who here has worked at a customer-facing job? All right, well, when we're working in industry with a client or with anyone, it could be internally, one of the things that we have to deal with is the client specification changing, and this is very common, right? And the aim of Agile is to just reduce overheads, okay, in the software development process by limiting documentation. Documentation is important, but you know, when the requirements keep changing or the nature of the work keeps changing, that's going to essentially, I want this done. Okay, we'll base our documentation design around design choice A. A week later, the client wants something completely different, right? So if we focus on what they want more, then these overheads are going to essentially take up too much time on the project. Makes the whole process a bit more efficient, really. Here's a little bit about the manifesto. I'm not going to read that quote out, but you guys can read that for yourselves. What does it sort of explain? We put value on the items involved, right? And we value items on the left more, okay? What are some of the principles of Agile methods? Okay, customer involvement. Agile believes that the customers should be closely involved throughout the development process. This is good. This is what you want, really, because the further away the customer is from the development process, the less satisfied they're going to be with the product they have in the end. And to be honest with you, so many times I've seen software projects go out the window because there wasn't enough contact with the client. And I mean, who here has hired a graphic designer before? Ever hired a graphic designer? Well, one of the things that graphic designers do is they ask for feedback based on mock-ups, right? Say, Ken, you're running, like, I don't know, a cookie business, right? Selling cookies, right? And you hire me as the graphic design guy. And I go, what would you like to do? And then you tell me, oh, I want these designs done, okay? Well, I go away and I give you some mock-ups, right? I'm involving you saying, this is where I am now, and these are some of my ideas. The closer I have to you in the whole process, at the very end, we're going to be able to come up with a better delivery of a product than if you just go do this, okay, come back, no contact throughout that whole development process, okay? So the principle of customer involvement is taken quite seriously here. And then we've got things like incremental delivery, people, not process, embrace change, and maintain simplicity. So, Agile method applicability. So, product development where a software company is developing a small or medium-sized product for sale. Okay? Does anybody know what might be a difference between a product-based business and a service-based business? Yeah, go ahead. If I'm a company that's selling an app versus I'm a company that provides IT services, what might be some of the differences in how we work?
One's targeted approach, one's more flexible about
Yeah.
its work.
When you're dealing with service-based IT, generally there's not just one deliverable that you're focusing on. It's many different things, and it's an adapting list of needs. So Agile becomes quite, I would rather personally work for a company that has a product-based delivery. We engineer the product and we sell it as how it is. But with the growing need of the IT industry, we can have these service-based businesses that, say, provide bespoke software. They're going to have to work on projects like this, okay? So custom system development within an organization, where there is clear commitment for the customer to become involved in the development process, and where there are not a lot of external rules and regulations that affect their software, okay? So because of the focus on small, tightly integrated teams, there are problems in scaling Agile methods to large systems. Again, there's a reason that we don't see Agile on such a big scale, okay? What's one of the development methodologies we might see in a big business, like Microsoft, for instance? We might see something a bit more structured, like waterfall, might be one. What are some of the problems with Agile methods? Well, generally it can be difficult to keep the interests of customers who are involved, right? Team members may be unsuited to intense involvement that characterises Agile methods, okay, because it is an intense process. Prioritising changes can be difficult where there are multiple stakeholders, okay? And maintaining simplicity requires extra work. It's kind of an ironic statement, isn't it, really? Contracts may be a problem, as with other approaches to iterative development. If you're only contracted to work on a certain stage for a certain time. Agile methods and software maintenance. Most organizations spend more on maintaining existing software than they do on new software development. It's surprising, isn't it, really, when you think about that? So, if Agile methods are to be successful, they have to support maintenance as well as original development. And we've got two key issues. Are systems that are developed using an Agile approach maintainable, given the emphasis on development and processing, minimizing formal documentation? And can Agile methods be used effectively for evolving a system in response to customer change requests, right? And problems can arise if the original development team cannot be maintained. Plan and Agile development, okay? So, plan-driven development, this reflects more of our traditional software engineering approach around separate development stages. It's not necessarily the waterfall model, like I've just mentioned. It's plan-driven and incremental, but the waterfall model is a very start and stop finish, okay? And iteration occurs within activities, which is one of maybe the differences between plan-driven development and the waterfall model. And Agile development, again, specification, design, implement, testing are interleaved, etc., etc. So, these little diagrams of some text. Plan-driven and Agile specification. What do they look like as a process? Well, a bit like this. In this, it seems that what's in the requirements is the general focus of this process, and then we have iterations, okay? But in Agile, requirements design, requirements design, requirements design, okay? It's that this sort of process works a lot easier with less people, okay? Whereas this is a bit more formal and would work with more. We've got a few issues, technical, human, and organizational issues. Most projects include elements of plan-driven Agile processes, depending on the balance. So there are a few here. Different questions. essentially, that we're asking here. And, you know, generally the question that we want to answer is, you know, do we have the requirements to conduct a project under Agile methodology? I assume that Peter, Ken, Sophie, Dean, you guys all together are going to be building a project, probably using, I'm guessing, some kind of Agile sort of method of development. If you think that Agile would be suitable, do you mind explaining why you think it might work for your project?
You can just do a bit, go back over it, do
Yeah.
a bit.
Yeah.
Just
Incremental, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Ken, can you think why you might find Agile useful for your project specifically?
So that each one of us would be able to get input.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because it's human focus, you know? Focuses on the people rather than the process. Good. All right, let's move on. Again, just some more considerations. System lifeline, organisation and support. A bit more, because so there are quite a few that come into here. Cultural organisational issues. How good are the designers and the development teams? So skill is another one, right? And external regulation, you don't have to worry too much about that. Right, extreme programming, here we are. You can think about extreme programming, right? Okay, it is the best known and most widely used Agile method. And it's just a method of Agile, it is not Agile itself, okay? Extreme programming is a form of Agile, okay? And it takes a extreme, okay, quote unquote, approach to iterative development. Okay, so new versions may be built several times per day. Increments are delivered to customers every 2 weeks. In the software industry, that's very fast. And all tests must run for every build, and the build is only accepted if the test runs successfully. So if I'm building a website and I have unit tests on that website, I can only deploy the solution once it's passed those software unit tests. And unit testing is something that you can learn online. Extreme programming in Agile principles. Incremental development is supported through small, frequent system releases. So this might be useful if you, so Peter, Ken, Dean, Sophie, say we were all working in a garage building an app. Extreme programming might be a suitable methodology for us because we're all a tight-knit team working closely on the same changing specification. Okay, but in a large organisation, do we think that will work? Extreme programming? Probably not. Again, customer involvement means full-time customer engagement with the team. Okay, people not processed through pair programming. Okay, and pair programming is just 2 people working on a programming problem. Like if you, Peter and Ken, like if you were at that computer and you were trying to build, I don't know, a JavaScript applet, right? And then Ken was doing a bit of programming, and then Peter was looking up documentation or doing debugging, and then you switched over. That would be an example of pair programming, okay? Let's move on from that. Right, so a bit about the release cycle. Where do we start? Well, let's say we go on plan release, develop, integrate and test software. Release software, evaluate the system, select user stories for this release, break down stories to tasks. What is a user story? It essentially, you can think about a user story as any sort of process, okay? So, stories to tasks. This is an example, right? User logs into app, okay? So user navigates the application, they load the application, they log in, and then they're connected to our database application, right? Then we break that down to a task. What do we have to do? Build UI, build database, build login connection, build login scripts. That way we're breaking down user stories as in what are the user requirements, then what are the user stories, so what are some of the things that might happen in the user's life cycle, and then we're breaking those down into things that we need to do, right? Things we need to build, okay? Because Because if we go user story, is user logs in and updates the database. Well, we've got to create the database, we've got to create the system, we've got to create the front end, we've got to create an update record, a page for the update, like I'm talking in terms of like PHP. So really the user story can tell us what we need to build around it, right? It's not for everyone, but here's a little bit about extreme programming practices, okay? We're talking incremental planning, small releases, simple design, test-fast development, and refactoring, okay? You can read a bit more about it there if you want to. I'll just put this coffee down. Here are a few more practices. Pair programming, collective ownership, continuous integration, sustainable pace, and on-site customers. What are some of the requirement scenarios? A customer or user is part of the extreme programming team and is responsible for making decisions on requirements. User requirements are expressed as scenarios or user stories because they don't technically have the user training. They say what they want from the system. These are written down on cards and the development team break them into implementation tasks. These tasks are the basis of schedule and cost estimates. What's it going to cost us to build this thing the user wants, right? The customer chooses stories for inclusion and the next release based on their priorities and schedule estimates, okay? It's really just breaking down what the user wants and building the system around that. Prescribing medication story. Again, this is an example of how extreme programming works in its incremental stages. You can read that for a second if you want. All right, we'll move on now. And then we sort of take that story and what it was, and we break that down into tasks, right? Task cards. Dose checking, checking an ID, checking prescribed dose. See how we would break that down in XP. So conventional wisdom in software engineering is design for change. It's worth spending time and effort anticipating changes as this reduces cost and life cycle. If our client says, oh, I only want to store 50 medications in my new system, we create room for 5,000, right? Because it turns out in a week that they've got 50 new medications. It's a new pharmacy. So it's better to future-proof our designs. That's what you can think about. It's better to do that before rather than after. And then a little bit about refactoring and making changes. Few examples of refactoring. Reorganization of class hierarchy to remove duplicate code. If we've got two user stories that are essentially similar, there's no point doing the same task twice. Some of the key points from that. Incremental development. Do we focus on agile or plan-driven approaches? And extreme programming is a well-known agile method, and it works on the basis of frequent releases, okay? Cool, all right. I'm going to pause that, and that's the first half done. Has anybody got any questions? All right.